Taryn Johnston, founder of non-profit organization Henops Revival, #Revolution, presenting The Citizen's Voice.
So we were going to have Taryn Johnson, who's from the Henops Revival. Sadly, she's taken ill, and in her stead, she sent Mark McClue, who's the co-founder and CEO of Armour. And I'll let Mark really share a little bit more about his journey in this space as someone who comes from a corporate background, private equity, M&A, but as an avid kayaker, I believe, has now transitioned into this NGO space and does a lot of advisory work for Taryn as well. So a warm round of applause, everyone, to hear about the community voice in the sustainability journey.
Thank you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. So you're all expecting a blonde water warrior superstar called Taryn Johnson, and instead you've got a Scottish African called Mark McClue. So, Michael, thank you for the introduction there. So I do have a business background from process in the quality industry, then in turnarounds and in corporate M&A. Left that and went into business incubation. But ultimately, it led me into the world of social and sustainable impact. And I do know a number of the people in the audience here, which is good. And I've met you both in the commercial world and in the work we do within the NGO space. So you touched on the end there. My journey with water started as a whitewater kayaker at a young age, and driving Land Rovers, and the relationship with the environment was born at a very young age. And I've just come back from a trip driving across the African continent in old Land Rovers. And part of that was to explore and understand what's going on about water and plastics across the African continent. And when Taryn called me last night and said, look, is there any chance you could do this? I thought, okay, that's cool, we can do this. It gives a great chance to chat and to interact with the key players in this industry that I think have a very important part. But the story here, and the reason for talking on behalf of Taryn, is really to introduce the fact that civil society, NGOs, are, I think, a big piece that can fill a massive gap. That all of you have spent time having your doors knocked on, emails received daily, to be approached to help people. And you mentioned, I heard the words earlier, snake sales, oil salesman. You know, often NGOs, private sector, civil society individuals who want to make a difference don't necessarily always come from corporate background. Taryn and I met in 2019 at a cleanup activity. She's always had a passion for water in her life, and she has, sorry, let me switch onto the screen. Taryn's always had a passion for water, but I don't think at that stage she understood what she was going to take on as a challenge to clean and address the problems of environment within the Henops River catchment. And she was going to open today by basically saying, hi, I'm Taryn, I've come to a plastics conference to talk to you about water. And that is indeed what she's doing, because water, in many ways like plastic on every table in front of you, is common to our daily life. Water we can't live without. And positively, this is basically a summary of Taryn's, the Henops Revival NPO that she set up. And the key part in this list of points here is the great disconnect she mentions in the middle. There is a disconnect, I believe, between a lot of talking and a lot of policy that has been imposed on the world, and large corporates have been pulled into that space, with NGOs that have been battling since the days of throwing paint cans at large ships and telling people what we shouldn't have been doing to the planet a long time ago. And I think it's a case of now not necessarily pointing fingers of blame. It's fantastic to see younger generation and younger mindset and new ideas coming into this industry that wants to address this great disconnect between the fact of what we think we're doing and what is actually happening out there. And my objective here is to show you what Taryn has put together. Part of the challenge, as opposed to me pulling out my suit and getting back on a stage, was that there's a good number of slides here to show you, but the picture will tell the story as opposed to me chatting. And the picture is something that I think you're all aware of, but I really want you to watch and look at the pictures that she's put together as opposed to listen to the words that I'm trying to convey. So this is the positive things that she's trying to address with the Henops Revival. And Armour, that as an NGO provides a voice for water, to try and assist and support as a custodian water activists and water warriors like Taryn in the work they do. Here are some of the problems she's facing. Very topical, the first one at the moment. Everybody's pointing fingers of blame at the government. And yet every day we all get in the traffic, whether you're working for government, private sector, or an NGO, or you're unemployed, you are engaging in your impact you're making in this environment with every choice you make. In the government space, but I believe this is true in the corporate as well, there's these large voids between keeping large entities moving forward, planning, projecting, particularly when you've got declining economy, incomes, and costs. Same with you guys with corporates. But this void, we see it all the time. And as a result, a lot of the South African environment is degrading as opposed to improving, despite some of the changes. And there's some really positive things I'm hearing today, which is really good. Like the previous slide, the great disconnect, in here I think the key word is the source. Everybody points fingers here and they say, oh, at Alexandra or at Tembisa. And they point just a general finger there and forget that perhaps at home you have a dishwasher, you have a washing machine, you have 2 cars that you wash on a Saturday with detergents. And in one of the challenging roles we have is to try and get that connect for people to understand that while they're washing that car, those soaps are going down into the river system, into the water system. And likewise with the plastics. And to listen to the stats to do with the returnable Coke bottles and hearing has there been an uptake, even myself sitting there, I went, oh yeah, now what do I do with my returnable Coke bottles that are now plastic? Glasses in my head to say, well, I do this with it. So it's this understanding that there are many sources and we are all a source. The people who don't exist, this is something that's very passionate to Taryn. From the first moment the COVID clampdown came, she went and got her paperwork that enabled her to carry on doing what she was doing. And she redirected Hennep's Revival to many of the people that are living on the banks of the Hennep's River, actively helping and assisting to clear up the waste around this country. And again, I'm talking to the parties here that understand this. I think the figures are somewhere between 60 to 80,000 people involved in an informal collection network that people don't necessarily want to take on. And I understand the corporate reasons for that. And certainly the governmental ones are challenging. But Taryn took it upon herself to help people during that time that effectively didn't exist. And yet they do. And we see them every morning from when you're getting up early to go to the plane and when you're coming home at night. These guys work from crazy hours in the morning pulling trolleys around on the roads. And effectively, everybody says they don't exist, and yet they do. And we meet them on the rivers, and there are in some cases, in many cases, highly educated people. One of the things that's critical to understand is that just because people are unemployed does not mean they're unwilling, unable, or unskilled. They just don't have an opportunity at the moment. And I'm grateful for this opportunity to be able to convey what Taryn is doing to create some of those opportunities or turn them into reality for people. Law enforcement and no maintenance. I don't need to say any more there. Okay, they are challenges that you face as well within the same environment that we're trying to tackle. And it is great and encouraging to see how policy is now finding its way into your industries. And with willing parties. I see faces in the audience here that have been incredibly supportive of the NGO space over the last 5 to 10 years, and thank you for that. You don't realize how a small part that you do can make an incredible difference. Okay, one thing Taryn does is doesn't talk about it, she gets on and does it. So the key part that she wanted to bring across was the reality that she sees. She doesn't spend the days that you do within your industries, but she knows you. She sees you every day, okay? Incredible to hear a claim for a world with no waste. That's fantastic, or a goal. Incredible to hear that your objective is to recover every bottle that's out there. Okay, that's great going forward, and I'm not a guy that tries to look backwards. I try to look forwards, but there is an immense amount of waste already out there. And therefore, if the goal was to collect every plastic bottle that's already out there and every plastic chip packet, etc., you would see a vast reality that still has to be addressed. I foresee a day where mining companies will mine plastic dumps or mine dumps And I don't believe that that is as far as away as it should be. So these are pictures from Tembisa. So again, people look at this and go, well, there's the source, obviously. Well, it's one of the sources because it doesn't have the facility to deal with it. But I'm just going to click through these, okay? Also Tembisa. So it's not just waste in terms of plastic, and it's not the fact that people are hungry. We see corporates give up money and time, and we see suburbs get together to put food parcels together. We have to understand the country we live in. People are living in areas and consuming, and there you're seeing actual food put to waste that finds its way into the river system. And you look at that and you think that's crazy. But it's because the system is the wrong way around. The ability to understand what do we do with the waste that we create when we've just got sheer numbers of people across the whole city. When a restaurant does this in Sandton, no one sees it. Or a large shopping centre does it, it gets dealt with. And I'm aware of large estates that are beginning to take waste recycling really seriously, which is great. But it's no different in a township environment. Poverty reality. These people are living in areas of the rivers which are meant to be out of the way of the rivers, but because of urban runoff caused by increased development, not holding back water, as we would in a residential estate, we would hold attenuations, would hold water. But every building that we build here in Sandton increases the runoff and the speed of water that goes into the river system. And we saw the impact at Christmas. Some of the functions that Taryn's organization does has got herself involved in is emergency search and rescue, as well as myself. And during the floods over the last few months, the rivers come down, and it's not something where people say, well, why did you stay there? Why did you live there? Why did you go to the river today? It could be clear blue sky, and a thundercloud over Killarney can bring a 3 to 4 meter wave down the river to people who are actually just performing a baptism ceremony. And they didn't even know what was coming. And it resulted in 15 deaths. Taryn herself has had to go through this with some of the people she's assisting, some of the people she's helping. Municipal services reality. There's a massive gap there. There's a massive difference between the understanding of what needs to be done and what should be done. And also what should be done and what needs to be done. I think what's key here, and really good today, is to hear about separation at source, is to hear about how do we stop it before it becomes here. You know, the city bought 43 new trucks. That's fantastic. All it did is it told everybody in the city, great, put more waste out there for them to collect. It's not the solution. You know, in our own bins, and those of you that I can hear are from Europe, and it's not to say what Europe is doing is better, but certainly embracing how you separate at source is being done there. And my work in rivers began in the Thames. There was no fish, there was lots of waste, there was lots of litter, and they've been pumping sewage into it for hundreds of years. It took 30, 40 years for the salmon to come back, but it was kayakers, fishermen, it was river users who got together with the authorities and worked together with those authorities to close that gap. And I definitely think there are people in this room that can help at that point, and I've already heard it today. Illegal dumping reality. This is probably the biggest problem we have across the city. Everyone talks about, again, we've got running out of space, and Taryn refers to them just now, in our dumps. But in fact, if we separate at source, and if we embrace the people that are actually out there doing this work, we could solve this problem a lot faster, rather than looking for another big landfill site, or as the city's doing in trying to stop how much more we put in it, to slow down. I think we have to rethink it and think, well, actually, we've got thousands of places across the city that we can collect, formalize, and assist some of the goals and objectives that you are taking on yourselves as corporates and policy. You know, a lot of us choose to go to the gym to relax. This is the choice of many people in the country. This is their fun playground. Wetlands reality, close, passionate one to most of us was sure in the environmental space, and indeed many people in this room, I'm sure, spend their weekends going to places of beauty in this country. It is one of the most amazing countries for doing that. But sadly, we are killing and polluting, not from a bunny-hugging environmental point of saying we should be protecting the frog, but from the fact that we are polluting the sources of our natural spring waters in the Witwatersrand. 130 years ago, this was all fields where we're standing today. And now it's covered in concrete, and we are forcing the change to rivers. And rather than trying to look at an environmental thing of how do we take it back to what it was, we have to learn to adapt. We have to learn to adapt within our commercial space, and the NGO sector knows this very well. It is there at the forefront of trying to solve the problems, but with only the resources they can, using their hands, their gloves, plastic bags, not TLBs. And these problems need TLBs. And yet what's amazing is because of the growth of the unhidden or the hidden economy, buildings are going up across wetlands everywhere. On Tuesday, we saw a 5-bedroom house built on a wetland, 30-meter encroachment to where the original riverbank, and the gentleman who did it, who gave the time to speak to us, he believes what he's doing is right. What he's doing is, from a humanitarian basis, is building a house, he's building a property. And there will be people in this room who will say, yeah, but it's wrong, it's illegal. And yet the Centurion Lake hotels flood every year because they built a 400-bedroom hotel on the edge of the Hennep's River, over the Hennep's River, and it floods. So what's the difference? Why one is allowed to do it, the other isn't allowed to do it? I'm not here to solve that problem, but we can help address it. Raw sewage reality, horrible one, and the priorities obviously are delivering fresh water to the city and to residents. Those of you that would have heard this week, Minister of Water came clean, is that the right use of the word, I think, with the word sewage reality, came clean to say we have a water gap. We are using daily more water than we are able to provide. But we've known about this for a long time, about a 17% gap. So whilst we've had all these floods and we've had all these rains and our dams are full, we're already running out. But the link to yourselves as the industry is that those figures say that the per capita in Joburg, we use almost twice the amount of water globally on average. But the figures are a bit skewed because of industry. There is an immense amount of water used within the industries you have, and I know you've all got your policies on that, but we believe if we can close the gap between that and what the NGO sector is doing, there's ways to help both of us. The sewage is second to fresh water, but it's reached a point of dramatic environmental disaster. DWS, who we work with, and the municipalities are trying their best to grapple with the problems and the challenges, but I think we have to strengthen our way to work together. So Armour has an approach to challenge and cooperate. Taryn gets on and does it. Okay? So she goes and puts teams into this space of reality. We talk about cholera. Okay? We talk about cholera and everybody runs their tap and gets worried about the tap with the water coming out. That's not the case in Joburg. And what's upsetting to these cholera fears around? Cholera is coming from the fact that it will obviously occur in places where we allow the health to deteriorate in a community to the extent that we have. And this is now not just happening in townships, this is happening in Craighaven. This is happening in our rivers across the city, purely because of the sheer volumes of people we have. So the same way as you're creating plastic mountains, there are sewage mountains being created. But there is a link. And the link is the fact that the system was designed to carry sludge. It was designed to carry sewage, not toothbrushes, plastic razors, condoms, all of your absorbent hygienic products. That's one of the biggest challenges. This network and system is getting blocked. And I believe that you all have process within your businesses that deals with this every day. How do you refine projects? I'm listening to the discussions about different plastics. The plastic industry, the industries in this country have the experts within their own right to, I think, address some of the problems that these things are causing elsewhere in the environment. Non-compliance, that's a DWS issue and an environment issue. That's a photograph that actually went out yesterday. This is raw sewage being pumped into the Hennep's River from a plant. So these are the realities that Taryn wanted us to bring. These ones are very close to yourselves. And this part is, I could spend a lot of time talking about this. There's people in the industry that are doing a lot more, in the audience, doing a lot more about this. But it's the reality that Taryn wants to bring, that these people are the ones actually creating the solutions because they have been left with no one else to do it. But funny enough, they are creating jobs for themselves. They're creating incomes for themselves, and they don't exist. So we need to close that gap. Right, what does Taran actually do? A lot of the things that Taran does and the NPO Hennep's Revival, people think it's about, and particularly corporates when they get approached, can we help with a cleanup? They think it's about giving them money to buy some bags and celebrate one of the international days. Those are just the awareness things. Taran works all the time. From that moment she started to this point, she is actively involved as an active citizen to try and solve this problem, as are other NGOs, other water warriors across the region. But what she's done is point number 3 there, is it raised an awareness to an issue that people didn't want to tackle. What she's done is enabled the links to be joined between the municipalities and between the parties that are involved. And overall, she's made an impact, she's made a difference. She has created jobs for people, she's given them dignity, she's given the ability to actually make a difference in their own community. She's upskilled by going to training, taking people to training and arranging training. And she's got other citizens that have got involved and acted. Those of you in the audience that have been to corporate days, I would hope that when you went to a corporate day and did a cleanup or some form of activity, you left that day thinking, hey, you know what, I hadn't thought about that. And when you go back into the spa and you look at the shelf and you decide, what am I going to buy? If you can join those dots between your packaging and the choices, and there's nothing better than having young kids that have done this at a school sit in the back of the car or in the shop and say, hey, Mum, we need to buy that one, or don't buy this one. It's powerful. Community service hours offered by doing cleanups, bringing parties together, be it schools, be it other public citizen groups. All of this is about creating awareness. But the awareness needs to then link to the solutions that I believe you guys can provide. Mentioned schools already. And these are the guys. You're not going to tell kids not to eat chocolate. You're not going to tell them not to drink drinks. That's not the aim. But if they can try and understand what to do with the wrapper, what do they do with the packets to separate its source, we can actually solve the problems. Corporate social responsibility, often these words we use because it feels good. Often it was good because we can get the tax credits. But what I think is changing is a real commitment to understanding, hey, what do we do to make it a better world? Because this country is really only just seeing the beginning of what we're seeing. The consumer levels have increased. You've got all the figures, you know. We're selling more things, okay? But at one of the recent cleanups we found, or recent, it was last year, we found a yogurt pot from the year that Mandela was put into prison. So it was in the bank of the river. So this is not a new problem, but it does show you how long the plastic is going to be there. And when I paddle the river from here to Hearties, I can show you sedimentary levels or layers of plastic that occur because every time there's a flood, there is a new level that is buried in the sand. And you can actually, it's easier than archaeology because you can go to the best before dates and you can actually date sedimentary layers of plastic. So if any one of you wants to sponsor a bursary for a student, we have people waiting for bursaries to study things like that. Sounds silly, but this is the sort of thing Taran is doing, and we need to back her up and support her by being able to understand more about the problems we're creating, because they're very recent new problems in the scale of the world. Joburg's 130, 40 years old, but some of the plastics have been in the river 30, 40 years already. It would be great to try and understand what does that mean for the long-term environment. Employee engagement hours from yourselves. There's nothing better than sending an employee to go and do something meaningful. And they're getting paid to do it in many cases. But don't do it for one day. If you can link it to your goals and objectives, and then say, hey, now it's next Friday's World Water Day. If you can get there at World Water Day and look back and say, what did we achieve this year from our policies and our goals within? And are the employees growing with their choices as well? Community volunteering, environmental activism. This is really what it's about. The lady there on the right is Helen Dugan. She's one of the co-founders with us at Armour and a very, very good friend of Taryn. Helen's 81. Any of you that follow the social media, she does offer social media. And she's been an activist in her blood through and through. And there she is, still out there. And she's watching this change. And she's live on air now. Look, or listen to you live, or listen to me live on air. There's a public event. Taryn is very good at this. She's understood the difference between a small team picking up 200, 300, 400 bags in a day because they are doing it as part of their function, and a group of 400 people from the public who come, maybe only 50-odd bags get picked up, but the networking, the event is very purposeful, and that does lead to your ability to help and sponsor. Taryn has also achieved reaching MOUs with local municipalities. And she's actually managed to get to that level where the municipality is recognizing it's not that she's doing the work they should be doing necessarily, because their work is having to change. She's filling this gap between where your industries are, where she is as an active citizen, and what the municipality is very grateful she's doing. But we all live in a world where some of these people then post it in their annual reports of how well they've done. And yet they're all being paid to do it. And most of these people are volunteers that are working with this activity. And Taryn now runs workshops. She's done a few where she is doing exactly what you're doing here, bringing industry people together to understand that gap between the two. Year before last, we did a very, very active citizen science project with a team called My Water Check. And this was, again, taking people from Tembisa, from Diepsloot, parties who actually, rather than just looking at the river and seeing it as a divide between where they live, now saw and understood how important this water was. They were trained, upskilled, and we need more resources to be able to enable those teams, once you get them and giving them more knowledge, to understand how could they become river monitors perhaps across the whole region. This citizen science is a fantastic link between education, being taught what to do, and out there doing it and making an impact. Likewise, water quality testing. You don't need, we often say you could go and test the quality of the water blindfolded with a sponge. Okay, but the thing is, it doesn't hold up in court. And all the photos of all the raw sewage I want to give doesn't hold up. Water quality testing is not necessarily about telling us what we know. It's about to show whether there is a progressive change. And nationally, the green drop and blue drop water audits and infrastructure audits are coming back online with DWS, which is really good. And again, some of you in the industry would be party to that. But this is somewhere where people can help. Litter catchment systems. Controversial subject because you're putting something into the river to try and stop things coming down the river. So there are rules, regulations. But the tests that have been done, this was a litter catchment system that Taryn put in on the Hennep's, was very effective. But it was a testing ground to learn and understand what we can do. There are many examples of these, from small to big. Again, I believe there are people in this room that have expertise within dealing with process within industry that could be applied to this to come up with solutions. We've got universities now looking at this, and there are examples worldwide. But our Gauteng and Swani rivers, or Gauteng rivers, and the rivers in South Africa are different, because we get peaks and troughs and long dry system periods. So you put a trap across a river which has a 3 or 4 meter rise overnight, it has problems. But it's definitely effective in catching the waste and the packaging that comes from your industries, our industries. So this system is something that we'd love to talk to more people about, how they'd like to get involved. The impact that is made is evident if you ever come and see the work being done. There's a before, there's an after. And you will definitely have lots of people who will say, yeah, but by tomorrow it'll be back again. I can tell you that it is making an impact. The Hennep's River has taken out an immense amount of waste, which I'll show you just now. And therefore, every kilogram of that has not found its way down all the way to the beaches. And I often hear, and I've heard it today, there are people involved in beach cleanups. But that's after it's already happened in many cases, or it's come across the sea to get to us. We need to look more at the consumer source, where the capital of the consumer markets are, here in Gauteng. Downstream impact, Okay, so why should we be interested in this? Okay, I don't need to dwell on this for long. There is bottles of water in front of every one of you. If I was to bring bottles of water from the Hennep's River and put it in front of you, I don't think you'd drink it. I wouldn't recommend you to drink it, and therefore I wouldn't do it. But water is linked to all of us, and as I've already covered, we have a water gap. And Ahmed talks of being a voice for water. Why are we a voice for water? Because water itself can't speak until there's too much of it, and then we get destruction, we get death, or there's no water at all, like Cape Town and P is found. Now, Johannesburg, Pretoria, sits on a bit of a knife edge because we pump our fresh, beautiful mineral water from the mountains, bring it here, put chemicals in it, use and abuse it, and put it back into the river to expect it to come back. That slide shows that effectively, the scale at the bottom there, bad to blue being excellent, is the condition of the water and the rivers and the quality of the water in the systems. But we haven't reached the point yet of saying, I tell you what, let's take the sewage water and reprocess and drink it. Okay? Because you think we've got protests in action now. All right? In this country, I know if that announcement was made. So I think we've got to do something to try and solve the water gap and try and contain and protect the water we have. We have water, we're just managing it incorrectly. And this is what Taryn constantly talks about, that water is life. What's her vision? I'm not going to read out all of these. She has a clear vision, but she can't do this on her own. She has done an amazing job of being a leading water warrior that has taken every ounce of energy that she can to make a committed civil action group that has made an impact downstream. There are words on here, circular economy, that has definitely been talked about today. I believe the NGO space, Hennep's Revival, is a key part of that. And it's not just me talking. There's a list of the awards Taryn has earned. She didn't go looking for them, they came to her. And she's earned every one of them. And she is an example of what we need across this country. We need more people like Taryn who actually take civil action seriously and can create a linkage to people like yourself, because we all get up every day and use water, and we all use plastic. It's not the plastic that's wrong, it's what we're doing with it. It's what we're doing to manage it. And that's how we can assist in reaching people, because we get lots of the civil actors all moaning and complaining, and yet they all go to the shops and buy the products. Okay? We're trying to reach the 1% of visionaries, the 2% of leaders, the 3% of managers, and the 4% of doers that will then take entrepreneurial choices, industrial choices forward to make an impact. These are words directly from Taryn, and she tends to say them as the screen slide plays out. I'll just let you take them in. And last week or 2 weeks ago, I met a 94-year-old in Alex. 94-year-old. Fit as a fiddle, bright as a button, pre-apartheid, during apartheid, post-apartheid. And he talked to a group of us, he listened to a group, and he said, something has to happen within you for something to happen for you. And he was saying, these youngsters that are running the country, he was talking about the 60, 70-year-olds that are, he says they've forgotten what it's all about. And I would ask you just to, as Taryn asked, pause and reflect on some of the points, some of the pictures you've seen. Understand how much plastic waste is out there and how much, you know the figures better than me. This is Taryn lying on an area we call Polly Island. And if any one of you wants to go and visit it, we can arrange that with Taryn. And we discovered this by kayaking around the corner, and the river disappeared and couldn't see it, and we suddenly thought, where's it going? And we'd done a Tembisa through to Harties venture to go and understand the river. And the entire river was going under an island made of exactly what you see, where you see Taryn lying on it. And it floats, and it goes up and down, and it gets bigger, and effectively it's a natural litter trap. And it's astonishing to see, because it's got plants growing on it, and trees growing on it. And then when you realize and you look at what's happened in Natal, across this country there are pockets like this across all of our rivers. Okay. So this is really what Taryn was trying to bring across, is the reality of what you are doing in your industries to create and to produce needs to also be linked to how we can clean up what we've already done. And I can tell you it is making an impact, it is working. And I believe you have the key to that. There's some stats. These may be small numbers compared to what you see every day. But these are stats that Taryn has achieved with so little. Imagine what she could do with so much, with more resource. And the figures are still small. And there are people in the room here that have provided bags to all these organizations. Taryn, I know it comes off there, comes out of the bottom line somewhere. But rather than looking at the return of investment to what it's costing us financially, I think if we don't make these decisions, it's going to come as a cost to our environment, which will come back and hit us in a far harder way. So it's been really encouraging today to see the things you guys are doing. And this is what Taryn is asking. She needs help. She needs assistance. This is a short list of simple things that many of you already have in your equipment lists. And perhaps that's where some of the partnerships and synergy can come. I know that her relationship with Safripol is aimed at this, creating awareness, creating the relationship to the plastics industry, and to understand how do we manage it better. I'm just over my 30 minutes, but hopefully that gives you an insight to what Hennep's Revival is doing. I do wish Taryn would have been here herself to talk, and hopefully I've given her justice to link to the good work she's doing. And we need 100 Taryns, and there are many more you can meet. But Taryn is the leading example of it, and she is doing an amazing job to make an impact downstream. Thank you.